What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue here with my 2024 college football schedule preview and projected record series. The Indiana Hoosiers are up next, and before we preview their schedule for 2024 and give them an early projected record based on how tough their schedule is, let's take a look back at what Indiana did in 2023. Here are my projections and predictions last year for Indiana. My projection, of course, had them at 4-8, and then my prediction for them was also 4-8, so no high expectations, of course, for Indiana last year. Obviously, this team just going 3-9 in 2023, and it really wasn't just about the overall record for this team and also for the talent of this roster. It was pretty much about the schedule that they played last year, and I think that's the reason why this team ended up going 3-9, so it was a very tough season for Indiana. This was a schedule from last year in 2023. You look at obviously their non-conference schedule. They played Indiana State, Louisville out of the ACC, and then of course Akron here. So they had a couple of easy non-conference games, and then of course that big one against Louisville there in Indianapolis on September the 16th. So that was a very tough non-conference game there. They ended up losing that game either way. So, and then you look at the losses coming in the conference last year. Lost to Ohio State, Maryland, Michigan, Rutgers, Penn State, Illinois, Michigan State, and Purdue. So again, this schedule was very tough last year for Indiana, and I think that's the reason why this team did go 3-9 last year. Only one conference win against Wisconsin, so they didn't go winless at least. That was the really good news there for this Indiana team, but it is a new era for this Indiana team with a new head coach, so we'll see if they can turn this Indiana football program around. Let's now look at the schedule here for 2024, and here is that schedule for Indiana. And before we go game by game, let's take a look at who they will play in their non-conference schedule. So you look at this non-conference schedule, they will play FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte here in the non-conference. So this is a pretty easy non-conference schedule for Indiana. Don't have to play, Louisville or any like other Power 4 team there in the non-conference. They do have a pretty easy non-conference schedule, and these are pretty much all three games that Indiana pretty much should take care of business. And you never know; they're not guaranteed wins in the non-conference, but these are pretty much games where I think Indiana should be favored by at least 20+ points. So that is your non-conference schedule. Again, an easy non-conference schedule here for Indiana in 2024. Let's go back to the schedule now and go game by game now for Indiana. They will, of course, start things off with FIU on August 31st, and then after that they play Western Illinois here on September the 7th, and then they go on the road to play UCLA here on September the 14th to open up conference play in the Big Ten, and then it's back at home against Charlotte here on September the 21st, and then also at home against Maryland here on September the 28th. They get to the month of October, they'll play on the road at Northwestern here on October the 5th. They get their first bye week here of the season in the second weekend of the month of October. And then they'll come out of the bye week to play Nebraska at home on October the 19th. And then also play a home game against Washington here on October the 26th. And then they get to the month of November. They go on the road to play Michigan State on November 2nd. Then back at home for Michigan here on November 9th. And then they get their second bye week here of the season. In the third weekend of the month of November, they come out of the bye week to play Ohio State here on the road on November 23rd, and then they obviously close things out with Purdue at home on November 30th. So that is the schedule for Indiana for 2024. It's not quite as bad as it was from last year. You do have a lot of very winnable games here on this schedule for Indiana. And like I said earlier, you do have a favorable non-conference schedule. And then, of course, you got Maryland and Nebraska both at home, Washington at home. Those three teams are definitely very winnable games. Northwestern and UCLA, Michigan State and Ohio State. Ohio State definitely will be a very tough one. And then, of course, you got UCLA, Northwestern, and Michigan State. These are all very tough road games, but I think they're definitely very winnable for Indiana. And again, you obviously got the rivalry game with Purdue as well, so that's obviously a very winnable game. So a pretty favorable schedule here for Indiana. It is tough, but it's a pretty favorable schedule, and also a lot of games that I think are very winnable. So let's get to the projection now here for Indiana for 2024. This is the scale I use here for my projections. If it's a 1% game in the red, pretty much that percentage is counted as an automatic loss. Then 20% games in the orange are going to be games where Indiana will be about a double-digit underdogs, and then 40% games here in the yellow will be games where Indiana will be a clear underdog game by about a touchdown, and then your 50-50 games, of course, will stay in the white. Games I think can go either way. And then your 60% games here in the purple are going to be games where Indiana will be favored by about a touchdown, and then 80% games here in the blue will be games where Indiana will be favored by double digits and also by about a couple touchdowns. And then your 99% games here in the green are pretty much your easy wins and also your automatic wins here on this schedule. So we'll start with that percentage here first for Indiana for 2024 at 99% here in the green, the easy wins and also your automatic wins. I think you got 3 easy wins on here already for Indiana: FIU, Western Illinois, and Charlotte. All 3 your non-conference games here on this schedule for 2024. And again, these are all games that Indiana should take care of business in. I think they'll be favored by 20 plus points. And to be honest, I think all these games are pretty much over 95%. FIU, probably a game that probably could be at 90%, and maybe Charlotte as well, because Indiana does have a first-year head coach. But I do expect Indiana to take care of business in all 3 of these games, and pretty much these are counted as automatic wins and also easy wins for 2024. They're not guaranteed wins because you never know what can happen in college football. We've seen some Power 4 teams and also like FBS schools really struggle against some FCS teams and also against non-conference teams. But I think Indiana, again, they should be able to take care of business in all 3 of these games. So again, those are 3 easy wins there for Indiana. And then you look at the rest of the schedule here. These are pretty much all Big Ten games. I don't really see Indiana being a favorite in all these games here. So I don't really have any games on here where I can favor Indiana by double digits and also by about a touchdown. So let's skip over the games where I think Indiana will be underdogs in. I do have 2 games on here where I think Indiana will be big underdogs in the red, which are also counted as automatic losses. And those 2 games are going to be Michigan and Ohio State. As of right now, I don't really see Indiana competing in either one of these games. Michigan, you probably can make an argument. That game probably could be in the orange and probably a game that could be in the yellow as well. But I think Indiana is going to be a big underdog here against Michigan. This is based off, you got to remember, this is based off of where the teams were from last year. So Michigan obviously winning it all in 2023. So I think Indiana will be a big underdog there in that game. And then, of course, Ohio State on the road. No chance that Indiana will beat Ohio State here. Obviously, Indiana's not really on the level of Ohio State like they used to be. So that's a game that I don't really see Indiana going on the road and obviously beating Ohio State, which is obviously a playoff contender this year. So those are your 2 automatic losses here for Indiana on this schedule. And then we go to the games where I think there'll be a double-digit underdog in. And I got 1 game on here, and that's Washington here on October 26th. I think Indiana will be a double-digit underdog here against the Huskies. This is a game that probably you could make an argument as well that should be in the yellow and also maybe in the 50-50 range. But like I said, with Michigan, this is based off of where the teams were from last year. And Washington did go to the national championship and then obviously win it all in the Pac-12. I think Indiana's going to be a double-digit underdog here against the Huskies for right now. But that's definitely a game to keep an eye on if you're an Indiana fan. It's definitely a very winnable game. It's not pretty much a guaranteed loss and also a guaranteed win. But it's definitely a game to keep an eye on. I think Indiana's going to be competitive in that game, so we'll see what happens. And then I got 1 game on here where I think Indiana is going to be a clear underdog in. And that 1 game is going to be against Northwestern here on the road on October the 5th. So this game is on the road. That's the reason why this turned out to be like a yellow game for me for this Indiana team. If it was at home for Indiana, it would definitely be in that 50-50 range, but I'm going to stick with it here and put it in the yellow for right now. And obviously Northwestern does have the home field advantage. They obviously went to a bowl game. So that's the reason why as well. Northwestern was definitely a more better team than Indiana was last season as well. So I'm going to favor Northwestern in that game by about a touchdown. And I'm going to make Indiana a clear underdog in this game on the road at Northwestern. So these are pretty much games where I think Indiana will be underdogs in the red, orange, and yellow. And then you got the rest of the games on here in the white, 50-50 games here for Indiana. UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska, Michigan State, and Purdue. These are all my 50-50 games here for Indiana for 2024. You look at Maryland, Nebraska, and Purdue, you get all 3 of those games at home. Those are definitely very winnable games in my opinion. So I think those are pretty even matchups there. And then you got Michigan State and UCLA both on the road. Those 2 games, I know they're on the road, but I think those are definitely very winnable games here for Indiana. You look at UCLA and Michigan State, both of those teams have first-year head coaches, and Indiana also has a first-year head coach as well. So those are 2 games that I think Indiana can win, even though they're in very tough, road environments. So I think those are 2 games that they can definitely win. And like I said, 5 50-50 games on here for Indiana. Obviously, Maryland, Nebraska, both 50-50 games here at home. home. They are definitely very winnable. And then you obviously got Purdue here. I know that's a game that Indiana probably could be a favorite in, but that is a rivalry game. You never know what can happen. So those are all my 50-50 games here for Indiana. So let's now get a projected record here for Indiana for 2024. This is not going to be my official prediction. This is simply going to be a projection based on how tough the schedule is. So we count those 3 green games as automatic wins, and then you count those 2 games as losses in the red, and then you average out that 1 game in the orange at 20%, then average out that 1 game in the yellow at 40%. Then you average out all these 50-50 games here at 50%, and the overall projected record for Indiana comes out to be 6-6 here for 2024. So a 6-6 projected record here for Indiana on this schedule based on how tough it is. So like I said, it's not a very tough schedule compared to last year. Like I said, you do play Michigan and Ohio State here both on the schedule. Those are 2 automatic losses there. But like I said, there's a lot of very winnable games here for Indiana on this schedule. And I definitely think they can have a chance to beat Washington and Northwestern. Both of those games are like underdog games for Indiana. But they do have a chance to beat them both. So don't really sleep on those games. And then you got your 50-50 games. What if they win all 5 of them? That would be a really big shocker if Indiana does that. I don't really see them doing that, but it would really be a big shocker if this team did make it to a bowl game. But based on how tough this schedule is, our projection is telling me that, Indiana is going to probably go to a bowl game this year, and that's why the projection came out to be at 6-6. So, again, my projection for Indiana is 6-6 for 2024. Give me your thoughts on this Indiana team down in the comments below when you think their projection for 2024 is as well. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports Channel.